Mr. President, it pains me to say this on the floor of the United States Senate, but there's nothing else, no other way to describe what America is facing today. By every objective and measurable standard, the policies of our government constitute child abuse when it comes to the treatment of these children at our border. Hardly a day goes by that we don't hear another horror story involving these migrants, and particularly their children and babies. Now, I will concede, having been there and seen it and read the numbers, we're being overwhelmed. And for that, there should be some understanding and perhaps even forgiveness if we don't respond as quickly as possible. But this has dragged on and on and on for months. There are children who are being held in detention under circumstances and conditions which are an embarrassment to this country and unacceptable in any civilized nation on earth, period. It led me to join with 20 other senators to write to the International Red Cross several weeks ago. The International Red Cross is called in countries around the world when jails and detention facilities have reached such a point that you need an international arbiter to come in and declare to that government and to the world how deplorable the conditions are. I never dreamed there would be a moment when I did that, asking the International Red Cross to review our own detention facilities in the United States. What brings me to this point? Well, it's well publicized in the press. A New York Times story of June 21st. Let me read it. A chaotic scene of sickness and filth is unfolding in an overcrowded border station in Clint, Texas, where hundreds of young people who have recently crossed the border are being held, according to lawyers who visited the facility this week. Some of the children have been there for nearly a month. Children as young as 7 and 8, many of them wearing clothes caked with snot and tears, are caring for infants they've just met, the lawyers said. Toddlers without diapers are relieving themselves in their pants. Teenage mothers are wearing clothes stained with breast milk. Most of the young detainees have not been able to shower or wash their clothes since they arrived at the facility. They have no access to toothbrushes, toothpaste, or soap. There is a stench, said Laura Mukherjee, director of the Immigrants' Rights Clinic at Columbia Law School. The overwhelming majority of children have not bathed since they crossed the border. I might find that hard to believe had I not seen for myself at the El Paso border crossing what's happening, albeit it was several weeks ago. But the circumstances described in this article on June the 21st mirror what I saw in El Paso. Let me say at the outset, and very clearly say, that many of the men and women in the Border Patrol and Customs and Border Protection are good people, caring people who come from families themselves and privately told me how heartbreaking these circumstances are. I am not going to make excuses for any wrongdoing by any of them or any federal agency. I wouldn't try, but I do want to concede the point that there are many who want to do better, but don't have the resources to do it. So why aren't we doing more here? Why in this empty chamber isn't the Senate coming together and working on a solution? We came up with $400 million in February, a special appropriation for humanitarian purposes at the border, supported on a bipartisan basis. Last week, we reported a bill out of the Senate Appropriations Committee, 31-1, to appropriate $5 billion to come down and do something about the circumstance at the border, a humanitarian response, and more. I supported it, most supported it on both sides of the aisle. It's time to enact it and do it as quickly as possible, and I stand ready for that to happen as quickly as we can schedule it. But in the meantime, we need to ask the basic question: how have we reached this point in this country? How have we reached the point when it comes to immigration that it is such a national embarrassment? Take a look at the record of this administration in 2.5 years. As you tick off the items of major policy decisions, you can find how we reached this point today. Remember the first one? The Muslim travel ban. We are banning people from Muslim countries from coming into the United States. Not too long after, this president decided that he was going to eliminate DACA, a program that allowed 780,000 young people in this country a chance to live here without fear of deportation. And then he turned around and eliminated the status of several hundred thousand in the United States in temporary protected status because they were escaping emergencies and crisis in their own countries and natural disasters. He followed that up with the notion of zero tolerance. Remember zero tolerance? Remember when Attorney General Sessions quoted the Bible, for goodness sakes, as his justification for separating infants, toddlers, and children from their mothers and fathers at the border? Zero tolerance. Finally, a federal court judge in San Diego said, enough. I want to know who those children are, and I want to know where they are and where their parents are. It was a common thing to ask. Sounds like an easy request, doesn't it? But it turns out we didn't keep records. These kids were separated from their parents without a record of where they were going and where the parents were going. It took weeks, if not months, and still we can't resolve the whereabouts of some of those children who were separated. Then came the president's decision that he announced by tweet a couple weeks ago that he was going to engage in mass arrest and mass deportations in the United States. Do you know what that means? It means children will be coming home from school to empty homes and wondering where mom and dad are. They're gone, you know. They've been deported. And the fact that they've lived here for a number of years, had no problems with the law, and are part of the community, and the fact that those children and others may be citizens in the household doesn't seem to be important to this administration. So when we come down to it, we've reached a point when it comes to immigration, a stage I've not seen in modern times, where we're being inundated at the border and in complete chaos here in the United States under the Trump administration. Oh, this president promised us when he was elected he was going to get tough. Boy, he sure knows how to get tough. He just doesn't know how to get effective. He doesn't know how to cope with something as terrible as the disintegration of the economies and the social justice system in 3 Central American countries that lead people to cash in everything they own on earth to give to a transporter or smuggler to take them and their kids to the border. That's where we are. And that's why we need to act. First, humanitarian assistance, yes. Count me in. The sooner the better. To put diapers on these babies, to give them basic foodstuffs, perhaps clean clothes. Not too much to ask in this great United States of America. And secondly, let's come up with an approach on Central America that makes sense. Swearing at them, tweeting at them, saying you're going to cut off all assistance to them, hasn't worked very well, has it, Mr. President? What I found out at the border was the smugglers used the president's tough talk to sell their case. You better get moving. He's going to get tougher. He's going to build a wall. You better get moving. And in panic, they do. This approach is not working. And it's clear that it's not working. And finally, haven't we reached a point in the United States of America where we know we need comprehensive immigration reform? I was part of that effort 6 or 7 years ago. 4 Democrats, 4 Republican senators. We set for months, John McCain, Chuck Schumer, Bob Menendez, Marco Rubio, Lindsey Graham, Jeff Flake, Michael Bennet. We sat for months, every night, working on another aspect of immigration reform. We put together not a good bill, I think it was a great bill. And there was a lot of compromise in it that I didn't like. That's what happens when you sit down across from the table and in good faith try to resolve your differences. We brought it to the floor of the Senate. 68 votes in the Senate, Democrats and Republicans, said we're for comprehensive immigration reform. As Senator Alexander of Tennessee, a Republican, said just a couple weeks ago, if we would have passed that bill and made it the law, we wouldn't be facing the mess we're facing today. Well, he's right to a great degree. I don't think it would have solved all the problems, but it sure would have solved a lot of them. What happened to that bill after it passed the Senate with 68 votes? It died in the House. The Republican House refused to even consider it. So here we sit with this mess on our hands with the president who tweets at people and threatens mass arrest and mass deportation, and the situation goes from bad to worse to even worse to embarrassing when it comes to the treatment of children. We can do better as a nation. This nation of immigrants, which I'm proud to be part of, this nation of immigrants has absorbed people from around the world in a systematic, orderly way in the past, and we can do it again. We need border security. No one should come in this country that we don't know who they are and what they're bringing in. Secondly, we cannot accept everyone who wants to come to America. It has to be done in an orderly, thoughtful way. And third, we should never accept anyone coming into this country who's a danger, period. And if they're here undocumented and dangerous, they should leave, period. Now, having said that, don't we all agree on that? Can't we move forward in a constructive, bipartisan way to solve this problem, to end this embarrassment? Once and for all, we've got to say to the president that tweets are not enough. What this reporter saw, what she reported as stench on the border, is something that should be an embarrassment to all of us. We're better than that. We need to prove it. Mr. President, I yield the floor.